to Pandesal Forum by Kamuning Bakery Cafe, and also in cooperation with the think tank of Asian Century. I have to look for the poster. 1 second. The Asian Century Philippine Strategic Studies think tank. This is in cooperation with Asian Century Philippine Strategic Studies think tank. We have 4 distinguished analysts from different places all over Asia, in Singapore, Iloilo, and of course in the Philippines. Our main topic today would be CPC 20th National Congress, which just concluded this past week in China. What is the impact on global and Philippine trends? Of course, we all know China is the largest nation on earth, which makes it the biggest consumer market for everything from tourism to exports. And also now the world's second largest economy and still growing, unlike some other economies that are already maturing or in turmoil now. So we look up to our neighbor for hopefully good news. Our speakers will be Mr. Herman Laurel, President of Asian Century Philippines Strategic Studies Institute, also host of radio and TV shows, and former head of the Philippine Refugee Processing Center in Palawan in his youth. He's already an activist and an idealist. Our second speaker is Professor Ana Malindog Uy, who I heard was cum laude or magna cum laude graduate of University of the Philippines, geopolitics and politics analyst. She is now Vice President for External Affairs also of Asian Century Philippine Strategic Studies, columnist also of several analysts, blogs and think tanks. We have in Singapore, Dr. Henry Chan, visiting Senior Research Fellow, Cambodian Institute for Cooperation and Peace. And he earned his PhD from Singapore Management University. A very distinguished analyst, not only of geopolitics, but also of economics and about technology, the trends in the world. Last but not the least, we have a genius from Iloilo. Attorney Leomil Aportadera is not only a doctor of medicine, not only an outstanding talented lawyer in the Visayas, he is also professor with a PhD, medicine degree na and PhD at he's teaching at University of San Agustin. And if you have cases in Iloilo, he's the best lawyer to go to. So let us start by requesting all our panelists to give their opening statements. According to the sequence, I will call on you. And then after all their opening statements, we shall open the floor for media and other questions from our guests. Mr. Herman Laurel, President, Asian Century Philippine Strategic Studies Institute. Can you summarize why this is important?
Yes, magandang umaga po sa lahat dito sa ating bayang Pilipinas, and good morning to Asia. Good evening to the Western world. Good afternoon to the Middle Eastern world. Similarly, in Latin America, we're greeting, maybe it's good evening too. It's not very clear. But we would like to start with answering the question of some people why we are focusing on China's CPC, Communist Party of China's 20th National Congress. Let's start by explaining that about 200 years ago, Napoleon Bonaparte said about China, quote, "China is a sleeping giant, let her sleep, for when she wakes, she will shake the world," unquote. China has indeed awakened and indeed shakes the world, but in the most positive and beneficent way. The world trembles, especially the developing world, but not in fear, but in awe and expectation. Today, what China envisions impacts the globe, impacts our ASEAN region and our country, the Philippines. China from 2012 to 2021, let me just move on to my visuals. First of all, I just wanted to give focus to the unique attributes of this year's 20th National Congress. First, it is a result of a whole process, people's democracy, democracy in its broadest, most genuine, most effective form, which we will elaborate on in a while in this very, very brief opening. And another outstanding feature of the 20th National Congress is that party representatives were selected, 33.6% of them from the front lines of party work, from a taekwondo, from a gold medalist in the Olympics, to workers in the rural areas, to engineers in various fields, and so on. I'd like to note that, of course, this is very different from our system where we have millionaires and billionaires in the Senate and in the Congress. Now to look into the importance of China today contributing to the world economy. China contributed, let me just again go back to my, in 2021, China contributed 18.5% of the world's GDP. I think I skipped one paragraph. Today, what China envisions impacts the globe, impacts our ASEAN, and so on. China from 2012 to 2021 contributed 38.6% of the growth of the world economy, while the G7 could only manage, combined G7 could only manage 25.7% contribution to the world economy. And in 2021, let me just move on. In 2021, China contributed 18.5% of the world's GDP. China is the Philippines' top trading partner today. Sino-Philippine trade rose from $61.15 billion in 2020 to $82.05 billion in 2021. It reached $18.1 billion in the first quarter of this year, 2022, up 9.5% year on year. And we can see that we can expect more in the coming times. China presents a new model for leapfrogging economic development for emerging economies like the Philippines, and redefines the global understanding of democracy. The next image shows one of these aspects. The 2022 Democracy Perception Index finds the Chinese people's view of their government as democratic at 83%, the highest in the world, higher than even the biggest democracies of India, which was somewhere around 70% only. And the trust rating of their government as a democracy in China, Chinese people's trust rating of their government is at 91%. It is the world's highest. In the United States, only 39% trust their government, per the Edelman Trust Barometer. The first figure is from the Alliance of Democracy survey of 53 countries. The second one is from Edelman Trust Barometer. And China's whole process democracy and meritocracy exceeds its democratic service to the people far, far more than the electoral democracies. China's international mission. China's international mission to all nations is to unify the world under peace and prosperity and build the, quote, community of shared future, unquote, practicing the vision through the Belt and Road Initiative and building of structures for the multipolar and multilateral world, such as BRICS, RCEP, and many others. So I think one of the features that is important about China and its political system is that it provides certainty over the many decades that have passed and into the future. China's political certainty gives the world a sense of stability. This is from the Global Times editorial. Countries are flocking to BRICS, the Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa plus, the latest of which is Saudi Arabia. In my view, after the 2024 U.S. elections in the U.S., the U.S. will join hands with China to build together the community of shared future. As the U.S. realizes, as the next image shows, an opinion piece in the Wall Street Journal, which says the U.S. isn't ready to face China on the battlefield. The invasion of Ukraine has exacerbated critical deficiencies in America's defense industrial base. So by 2024, with the peace movement growing in the United States, with potential candidates like Tulsi Gabbard, anti-war candidate, abandoning the Democratic Party and possibly shifting to the Republicans and working with President Trump, we can foresee a United States that will shift from being a warmonger to a peacemaker in partnership with China. So this is as the U.S. realizes it cannot win a war with the awakened giant, which seeks to end all wars for a forever peace for mankind. This is why we are pondering over the message of the recent Chinese Communist Party or Communist Party of China 20th National Congress. So with that, may we invite Wilson, the other speakers, for their 10-minute presentations.
Thank you very much, Mr. Herman Laurel, for your opening statement, stressing the importance of this CPC National Congress to the rest of the world and to the Philippines. Especially you mentioned stability, certainty in a world that is so uncertain. Next, we'd like to invite Ms. Professor Ana Malindog Uy, geopolitics expert, Vice President for External Affairs of the Asian Century Philippine Strategic Studies, for her opening statement. Welcome. Please unmute yourself, Professor Ana.
It's okay now? Okay
Yes.
na? Oo, salamat. Okay.
Yes, very clear.
Maraming salamat, Wilson, sa generous introduction, and thank you again for holding this forum ng Pandesal Forum. No? I have a very quick and very short, hopefully short opening statement. So first and foremost, I would like to greet our friends and colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, a pleasant morning to all. I think my part would be more on the impression of the 20th CPC Party Congress, and in terms of what's my impression and what are the takeaways, and at the same time, because I watch it from start to finish via the I think CGTN coverage. First, I would like to thank you all for attending this media forum with the topic CPC 20th National Congress, Impact on Global and Philippine Trends. The 20th National Party Congress of the Chinese Communist Party started on October 16, and it ran for 7 days. The CPC Congress is the most important political event in the People's Republic of China and happens every 5 years. I observed the opening session of the CPC's 20th Party Congress last October 16, 2022, and listened intently to Chinese President Xi Jinping's speech. After President Xi's report or speech during the opening session of the CPC's 20th Party Congress, I was indeed amazed and fascinated by the clarity of vision, mission, and policy directions of the CPC, especially in how China is to move forward, more particularly economically speaking, despite the challenges ahead that China as a country is faced with. In Chinese President Xi's speech, one can clearly understand that CPC commitment and firm resolve to build a socialist Chinese society with a vibrant people's democracy, the triumph of the rule of law, sustainable development, or what they call or what they term as high quality development, while continuously pursuing building a modern, moderate, prosperous, technologically advanced, an economically developed and mature Chinese economy based on Chinese historical rights was very evident in that speech. CPC's strong resolve to build a socialist, prosperous, peaceful country with Chinese characteristic was very much apparent in President Xi's speech. And at the heart of all of these things, I think, from my impression, is, of course, the welfare and the well-being of the Chinese people. I think China's aspiration of a national rejuvenation and peaceful rise, most remarkably as the global economic powerhouse and economic engine of the world amid the COVID-19 pandemic, is quite noteworthy, inspiring, I think, for the developing world especially. I think China's continued economic development, to a greater extent, no, the way I see it, will benefit the wider international community. Just to give you some points or figures, no, China is the second largest economy thus far. It is the biggest viable and attractive market in the world. Also, China is the largest trading country in the world. It is a major trading partner of more than 140 countries and regions across the globe. And thus far, it has established 21 free trade pilot zones. And also, China signed 19 free trade agreements with 26 countries and regions, and pushed for the implementation or what you call Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or RCEP, of which unfortunately the Philippines is not yet or did not yet ratify. And hopefully soon the Philippines will ratify RCEP, because this is a very important, I think, regional grouping that the Philippines will benefit most, I think, among other countries as well who are members of, that are members of RCEP. Yeah, in this regard, the more China develops as an economy, the more other countries, I think, will benefit from its economic growth and development, first and foremost through trade. Again, China is the second largest importer and the biggest exporter in the world. As the second largest importer, it's one of the largest export destinations of many countries across the globe for their export products, both processed, manufactured goods, and raw materials. On the other hand, China is the country with the largest trade surplus or highest negative net imports. Hence, it's the biggest net exporter in total value terms. And as an exporter, China does not only export goods to other countries, competitively speaking. In the process of export and import of trade, or trade for that matter, technology transfer and sharing also happens between the Chinese firms and other firms and enterprises. This is, I guess, important, especially for the developing world, and the Philippines is part of it, a part of the developing world. In the area of cooperation like the BRI or the Belt and Road Initiative, I think China is also gaining momentum, and even despite of the COVID-19 pandemic. As of the moment, if you look at the Belt and Road Initiative, China has cooperation with 149 countries and 32 international organizations. And it also, in terms of provision, I think, of investment in cooperation from China to other countries or part of the Belt and Road Initiative, I think thus far from my research, in terms of statistics, it created around 340,000 local jobs in these countries from China investments. So this is quite a very good picture to a greater extent, though we know that China is also facing a lot of challenges at the moment. And one of that, I think, is, of course, their zero COVID-19 policy. It's not yet open to the whole world in terms of, coming in and out of China. But I think one thing that we need to take note also during the speech of President Xi is, I think China is trying to strike a balance at the moment. It wants to have that economic growth and development and more income for its people, or higher GDP. But at the same time, I think it also wants to balance itself with what you call national security. The national security aspect is very much evident in President Xi Jinping's speech in last October 16. It was there, it was evident in there. So they're trying to balance those two. They want to have more economic growth, but they want also to have that national security. And I think the COVID-19 policy, the zero policy on COVID-19, I think is part of that kind of framework in terms of national security. But at the moment, also one thing remarkable about China, and it was also evident in President Xi Jinping's speech, is I think China's is putting premium on issues that has something to do with climate change and environment. They're very much committed to it. like China's strong resolve to pursue a high level or quality socio-economic development, which is pretty much centered on pursuing green development, is now becoming a reality more than a dream. No, China accounts for over 1/3 of world's installed renewable energy capacity. For instance, the share of coal in China's energy mix has dropped to 56%. And then the forests in China is also have grown significantly. So we can see that they're really committed to the climate change advocacy. And also in terms of green, low carbon and sustainable development, they actively participate in this field, globally speaking. So we can see the greater, how do you call that, the greater contribution of China in this regard. No. When you talk about challenges, I think, of course, the COVID-19, I think the way I see it is a priority still of China. So that's why I think when it comes to opening up, in a matter of time, they will, but I think it will be calibrated and opening up, not really like, open to the world, like anyone will go in and out. But I think it will open up little by little, slowly, but a calibrated one. And another, I think, China is facing in terms of challenges, of course, the trade war being imposed by the United States against China. Just recently, we have the Biden administration constricted China's access to semiconductor or chip technology. I think this is one of the challenges, but I think this will not hinder China's growth. The way I see it, the way I study China's economy and China's politics, I think this will never hinder, this kind of trade war being imposed on China by the United States. It may hurt China a little, or to a certain extent, but it will not hinder the growth of China as an economy and as a rising economic powerhouse of the world, no, because they can produce these things on their own, and there are also other countries that can possibly supply and replace the role of the United States when you talk about supplying this technology that they're trying to constrain China to have access on. So I think this is all, but this is a challenge, I think, that China is facing, the way I analyze it, the way I see it, no. So at the end of the day, what I can say is no one can deny that China is thus far the largest and the most viable market in the world. Its growth trajectory as an economy may face challenges like COVID-19, trade war, policies imposed by the United States, and many more. Still, China economic potential is huge, and it's not even a mature economy yet. It has a lot of space and room to further its development in different areas and sectors, and it has a booming and very competitive human capital. That one I have actually witnessed that China has really a booming and a very huge human capital. It's not just about labor force. It's all about the quality and the competitiveness of their labor force. They really are producing a lot of scientists, a lot of, very competent workforce. And I think from my perspective, the Philippines should learn from China in this regard. We need to also have that human capital for our economy to develop further, and for us to capitalize on our human capital. That's one thing. On the level of the international dynamics or geopolitics, I think China, one good thing that we can like a takeaway from the 20th CPC Party Congress, I think when you talk about foreign policy, is that I guess the international community should pay attention to China's aspiration and commitment to a peaceful rise as a global economic powerhouse and as a great power, both politically and militarily speaking, as elucidated by Chinese President Xi Jinping's speech during the opening session of the party congress. President Xi said that China would never seek hegemony or engage in expansionism, and that China stands firm against all forms of hegemonism, unilateralism, and power politics. It opposes Cold War mentality, interference in other countries' internal affairs, and double standard. Also, one important thing that I think the international community has to take note of when we talk about international relations and geopolitics and foreign policy is President Xi Jinping reiterated that China remains firm in pushing an independent foreign policy based on peace. The word peace is very critical, I think, with the global tensions going on, the Ukraine crisis, and so many things. I think the word peace there is very, very important. It has to strive to uphold international relations basic norms and safeguard global fairness, justice, and peace. These are important statements. I think that's very important for the international community and the world to take note of. And I think another one that is very important is the issue of the Taiwan question. I think the international community has to take note of the fact that the China is committed to peaceful reunification of Taiwan based on the speech of President Xi. But on the other hand, they have also that strong and firm resolve in upholding and safeguarding China's sovereignty and territorial integrity, like any other country in the world, I think. No? And this is important for any country at all in the world. So I guess all the speech of President Xi and the whole process, I think, of the CPC Congress, I can say that it's fair and square. I think it is important for the international community to take note of these statements, to understand where China is coming from regarding so many issues, especially the geopolitical issues, so that we can the international community will understand why China acts this way and why it says these things like this. No, so I think that's very important for everyone to understand. Indeed, China's economic development story will continue to unfold, and of course, everyone's eyes are on it. No, because I think China is the only country right now that is pretty much stable. Though their growth rate, their GDP is not as high as 8.1% of last year, but still, if you look at China, it's the only growing economy in the world at the moment. So it's very important for us to look at it and probably learn from it. No, and it is interesting to continue studying and witnessing the uncovering of the China puzzle and China miracle. On this note, I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to all of you for participating in this media forum. I also want to extend my special thanks to other panel of speakers for gracing this timely and vital media forum. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time and attention. Have a pleasant morning, and I will try to answer questions as much as I can later. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Ana Malindogoy, for that interesting overview of China as an economic, maganda sa her description, China as economic powerhouse of the world. And she just ended by saying it's the only growing major economy in the world, while the rest are in problem right now. She also mentioned renewable energy, 1/3 of the world is from China now, and also that their goal of peaceful reunification of Taiwan and other issues. Very interesting. Thank you, Professor Ana Malindogoy, for the economic overview. Now we'd like to invite Dr. Henry Chan in Singapore, visiting Senior Research Fellow, Cambodia Institute for Cooperation and Peace. He has a PhD from Singapore Management University, economics, geopolitics, and technology analyst. Dr. Henry Chan, for opening statement.
First, thank you, Wilson, Herman, Anna, for the invitations. And I'm particularly grateful to Herman and Anna has laid a very good groundwork to my report. I'm going to spend the next 10 minutes on the introduction to talk about two topics. First is that the new leadership lineup, and second is that the new prime minister and outlook for the Chinese economy. I think that if you want to understand this leadership lineup, which is unprecedented in many ways, so you must look at the historical context that the Chinese leadership framed the next 5 years. They use a very interesting term. They call the next 5 years unparalleled complexity, which this term actually resonated what President Biden said last week. He characterized the next 10 years as the most decisive decade for the United States. So both China and US apparently think that the power dynamics today underplay is not going to dissipate in months' time, in years' time, it probably 1 to 5 to 10 years. So if we take note of this historical context that the Chinese people frame in this party convention, this is indeed very historic. Now, in this kind of unparalleled complexity, normally it is not unusual for people to think that China now is putting a leadership that is fitting for a crisis era. Now, if you look at the crisis era leadership, what are the characteristics? First, you have a concentration of power. Second, all the new rules and old rules are being recast. They put in new rules and they make some old rules either flexible or being set aside. And third, in this kind of a crisis era leadership, you must remember security is always above economics. So right now, when you look at the Chinese policy direction in the futures, I think that this historical context is going to help a lot. Now, let me go into details. President Xi, in his opening speech, he said, national security is the foundation of national rejuvenations, and social stability is the precondition for national strength. So China will be oriented to a very disciplinary way of running the countries in the next 5 years, to my mind. That's how I interpret President Xi's speech. Now, if you look at how are the old rules being set aside, China for the last 25 years has a rule that there should always be a lady present in the Politburo. This year, there was 0. Number 2, the cast in stone number of 25 members of Politburo was changed to 24. And the third is that the old rules that when you are 67, you can continue for another term. But once you are 68, on the day of party meeting, you should be retired. This law is broken. Now, and Xinhua News Agency already said today, all the major candidates of Politburo were elected by the president. So you see a concentration of powers. Okay. Now, but this is not something taken out of context. If you understand the Chinese leadership today's thinking of a crisis era leadership, I think all those speculations should really rest for a while. And the key now is that how this leadership will perform. Now, there are some very outstanding characteristics here. First is that there's an ascendancy of science and technology people. Now, all the socialist communist system give preference to engineers because of planning economy. But at that time, they refer to university graduate engineers. This time, it is very different. It is research fellow, quality research engineers. Out of 24 Politburo members, 6 of them enjoy almost equivalent rank of academicians. So if you look around the world today, Chinese senior leadership probably has the most scientific and innovation-driven caliber of leaderships. 6 out of 20, means 25% are equivalent to academicians. So it resonated with this 4th industrial revolution theme. If you believe that in an industrial revolution, scientific know-how and innovation is going to be the driver of economics, and which in turn will be the driver of national capacity. So China today seems to be very focused in building up the national capacity of innovations and scientific breakthroughs. Now, one thing is this, I echo Anna. If you look at now, the Taiwan issue is being written in the Chinese Communist Party charter. You realize that this is not only an ordinary red line. This is the most red of all the red lines. And I think that the ASEAN countries is well aware of it. United States now is very well aware of it. And if there's any flashpoint between China and US, personally, I think Taiwan is the only issues. But that is going to be very critical issues because China now seems going on a national effort of putting together a crisis era leadership on these issues. China already built up the momentum on innovations, the momentum of scientific breakthroughs, but on these Taiwan issues, that is the biggest challenge facing not only China, the whole of East Asia, and probably it is going to affect the world. Now, second, let me go to my outlook for the new premier and outlook for the economy. Now, number one thing is this. Most of the analysis saying that the president put his own man as the prime minister, which I agree. Because in a crisis leadership, you just put the person who can read your mind. But you don't underestimate this prime minister's job when he was assigned in Zhejiang and Shanghai as the party secretary. Yangtze River Delta, with Shanghai as the core now, is where the Chinese semiconductor industry, biotechnology, electric vehicles are concentrated at. And in the last 5 years, he has been able to put the ecosystem with Shanghai in core at place. So I will keep a very close eye on how the new prime minister solve the problems in the next 1 year. Because the official change of prime ministership is March next year after National People's Congress. But there are some jobs waiting for him to do. And probably he's going to start the ball running after the Central Committee meetings. He's going to start it when the Economic Commission is going to meet at the end of November, early December. Now, what are these critical issues? First is that, how is he going to handle the COVID-19 lockdown? Because everybody realized that China now faces a very serious problem in the sense that the virus today is very different from the virus yesterday. You must remember China was able to conduct a very successful Winter Olympics. If you compare to infection cases between Chinese Winter Olympics and last summer's Tokyo Olympics. So they have been done it successfully, but the mutating Omicron just make it becoming a more prevalent, more infectious, but at the same time, much less virulent virus. So how China is going to handle this? Because from the original target set in March of 5.5% growth, most likely China is likely to end up this year at around 3 to 3.3%. Today, there's a third quarter GDP release at 3.9%, better than expected, but the average running until now is about 2.9%. So COVID-19 is the number one problem because China has been able to solve the manufacturing problems. They were able to allow the workers staying in the factory site, even under lockdown. So industrial production, fine. But the service industry, particularly the tourism industry, just cannot take any lockdown. So China have to look for it. Second is that, of course, the property market slows down. Everybody realizes in any country in the world, property market is always a pillar industry. So when Chinese handle the slowing down of the property market, I must say that they must look for a way out to put the economy. Now, I am very optimistic on this because they have done something that has shown some initial sign of success. And China has a very big advantage. All the land in the country is leased from the state. So by controlling the land supply, definitely the demand will catch up. So this is one thing I have, and it's not just out of my own thinking, because I have seen how Singapore work, how Hong Kong work. The government is always able to support property market when crises come because they are the only supplier of the land. And number three is this. Everybody knows that the US has put an unprecedented sanctions on everything you can think of. Now, definitely, it will slow down China. The key is that how long it can slow down China on whether it can stop China. Now, the consensus today, even in the United States and Europe, is that they cannot stop China. But the next question is that how long can they hold back China? This is one thing that is the job that the next prime minister has to handle. And last is that the global economy is getting into a very unpredictable era. Nobody ever imagined supposedly one of the strongest economy in the world, the yen, we start the year at 110 and today over 150 after Japanese central bank has spent billions and billions of dollars defending it. Now, what is the next episode? I do not know, but I'm very worried. And I hope the Philippine policymakers will take a very close look and monitor the situations. Actually, when I was interviewed by Herman, I said maybe it's about time they restart this Chiang Mai in multilateral initiative to have this $240 billion make more available. The present rule is that they are not available. 240 billion supporting ASEAN countries. That is going to make a very big psychological and market difference. And last, of course, is that there's a rollback of the globalizations. Global trade before the crisis reached a peak of 61% of global GDP. Now it dropped to 58. And the trend is that with this friendshoring, reshoring, China plus one, blah, 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 the world is going into a more inefficient economic setup. And because of that, how Philippines can seize the opportunity of ASEAN, of China plus one, is, I think, a very important topic. So all those uncertainties plus the exchange rate issues, I think set the stage for the next prime minister. And I think that if you just put that he's because close to the president, he get his job, I think that's an oversimplistic statement. So this is my opening remark, Wilson. Thank you very much for the invitation again.
Thank you very much, Dr. Henry Chan, for a very interesting overview of the new leadership in China, the technology, geopolitics situation. I like some of your very interesting, I like your descriptions. He enlightened us with a very science and technology-oriented new leadership team. He also said this is a leadership team preparing for global crisis. Next, last but not the least, our opening statement from Iloilo, Attorney Leomil Aportadera, professor at University of San Agustin in Iloilo Province. Welcome.
Do you hear me?
Doctor and lawyer, medical doctor and lawyer, PhD.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
I'm
very clear. Welcome.
I start. The Chinese dream today speaks of a changing China that is discovering consumerism, that is increasingly globalized and is also at a crossroad. Will the Chinese people themselves, inside and outside China, create a new sustainable Chinese dream based on their ancient values and respect for culture, family, and nature, harnessing technology and creativity? Good morning. The general analysis about the 20th National Congress is its message of continuity rather than change. No other incident argues for it than the re-election of Xi Jinping to an unprecedented third term. We will expect him to continue to advance Chinese interests in diplomacy. China will continue to assert itself for a greater role in global affairs in accordance with its rising power and status. Domestically, the Communist Party will continue its control over the economy and society. I chose to quote from the foreword of Lord Nathaniel Wei for the second edition of the work, The Chinese Dream by Helen H. Wang. It was, however, Hu Jintao who revived reference to the Chinese dream during an earlier 17th Congress in 2017. The 17th National Congress serves as a coming out party for China when it was covered by a then unprecedented 1,350 foreign and local journalists who used the Chinese dream in relation with this socialist harmonious society. Xi Jinping, in his first term, made reference to it as restoring earlier China's lost national greatness during the 18th Congress. Seen in the light of the policies laid down, especially during the 16th Congress in 2002, during which the anti-secession law was enacted on March 14, 2005, China watchers noted that Article 8 of the anti-secession law provides the formalization of the long-standing policy of the use of military force against Taiwan's independence. More recently, she said, the Chinese dream is the great rejuvenation of the Chinese people. He would continue during his keynote address at the 20th National Congress. He said, we must foster a firmer sense of purpose, fortitude, and self-belief in the whole party and in the Chinese people, so that we cannot be swayed by fallacies, deterred by intimidation, or cowed by pressure. While the term Chinese dream is closely associated with Xi, reference to it is almost 1,000 years old. What then is the Chinese dream? Xing Shishao coined the phrase heart full of Chinese dream in his poem during the Song Dynasty, 1127 to 1279. Premier Win Jiaobao also made reference to the lamentation in the poem over lost territory in relation with discussion with PRC-Taiwan relations. This, taking into account the anti-secession law of 2005, stoked the flame of the discussion of PRC's policy on Taiwan. With the pronouncement of China's most powerful leader, post-Mao, Chinese dreams suddenly became a hot topic and subject to a variety of literary, political, and diplomatic interpretation. Both the 20th National Congress and yes, even the Chinese dream have been more than about the territory of China. Lost in the obstinate focus on the term, Chinese dream was, and its various and different meaning, was the major policy of China's economic outlook that carries global implication during the 20th National Congress. China will accelerate new development patterns and pursue high-quality development. China is the leader in research and development in the world in terms of investment and output. Under the Community of Shared Future, China also declares a harmonious coexistence between humanity and nature by emphasizing efforts that resulted in 34.4% cut in carbon emissions since 2012 and aims to achieve carbon neutrality by 2016. China is the leader in the electric vehicle and electric battery sales worldwide. China's pledge to improve people's living standard by expanding middle-income groups worldwide through its initiative and investment in the AIIB, the New Development Bank, as well as in the Belt and Road Initiative. In this light, Thomas Friedman, the New York Times, articulated best the Chinese dream at what mirrors the people's expectations of prosperity with a more sustainable China. In closing, I quote Ryan Mitchell in his August 30, 2015 article on the China Dream. The idea of the China Dream was old, celebrated, and packed with meaning well before the English language even existed. It should probably not be considered as a mere calc or word-for-word translation on loan from the country founded millennia after its first usage. It articulates a sense of collective national striving that has for a very, very long time been central to the most influential accounts of what it means to be a member of China's imagined community. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Attorney and Dr. Leomil Aportadera, for that very enlightening opening statement, not only mentioning geopolitics, re-election of President Xi as a sign of continuity in a world in instability, even quoting Song Dynasty poetry, and also mentioning columnists from New York Times to other papers. Thank you for that overview. We'll open the floor for questions from our media friends. But before that, since Attorney Leomil Aportadera mentioned the columnist Thomas Friedman of New York Times, I'd like to mention lang a column of Professor Randy David 2 days ago in Inquirer. The title was Xi Jinping's China. Sabi niya, this is Professor Randy David of Philippine Daily Inquirer. He said in his column 2 days ago, with Western democracies showing signs of worsening political and economic decay beneath uncertain leadership, one cannot help but marvel at the sight of China confidently going through the rituals of political affirmation rather than of brutal contestation. Whatever infighting has occurred is safely hidden from view. The name of the game is projection of strength and stability under a unified leadership. I think that summarizes what Attorney Leomil Aportadera said, and the other speakers like Dr. Henry Chan, Professor Ana Malindog Uy, and Mr. Herman Laurel. We have one question here from, I forgot to mention, sorry, Attorney Leomil Aportadera and Mr. Herman Laurel are awardees also of the APPCU, which is the award for the promotion of Philippine-China understanding. Given recently, the question here I have, the first one, from another distinguished analyst. I will read the question, quite thought-provoking question. From Mr. Ado Paglinawan of the Golden Nation Network, GNNTV. He said, your glowing report on how China has possibly affected world progress and how the US is now poorly lagging behind must have been why former Philippine President Duterte considered China as his administration's top partner. Despite that, however, it appears his successor, I think he's referring to President Bongbong Marcos, is, this is the words of Mr. Paglinawan, pandering to the United States to the extent of offering our bases to the Western power in case China invades Taiwan. Do you have any explanation why President Marcos Jr. has seemingly pivoted from China to America? Anyone among the four distinguished analysts to this thought-provoking question from Mr. Ado Paglinawan, analyst and radio host, and also book author of 2 books. Anyone? I see 2 people smiling among the 4 panelists. So,
well,
can
since our
anyone
other resource persons are still
processing
figuring
the
out
question?
how they would phrase their response, I may as well
Yes.
start it. So our new president, PBBM, has raised a lot of questions about this over-friendliness to the United States of America in the midst of a global situation where the United States is identified as a troublemaker, as a warmonger, and its record of 50 years of warmongering is being dug up everywhere in the world. So it is really perplexing why this step backwards in terms of our foreign policy in relation to the United States is being taken. Suspicions are being raised. They are not flattering suspicions. And I suppose in a forum like this where honesty and intellectual integrity is expected, I would have to say this, that there are now rife suspicions that the younger generation of the Marcoses are angling for a deal with some of the assets of the Marcos family in the United States. For there is no other explanation that people are able to think of. But out of due respect, most people, even us who are skeptics by nature as intellectuals and academics, even us, we are restraining our questions. But this is being raised now. Back to you, Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Laurel. A follow-up question before Professor Anna answers. Is it possible also, like my personal speculation, is it possible he wants to publicly show exuberant friendship with America in order to free his hand when it comes to like dealing with China in a very practical way, like closing the deal on joint development and all that, so that the critics will not say you are too one-sided? Is it possible, a strategy, or am I reading too much into it? Any answers to the original question?
The question is quite really provoking the way I see it, no, and it's very political as well, no.
Yes.
In terms of answers, I think we can only speculate at the moment because there's no pronouncement coming from the president himself. Why it seems like the foreign policy of the country is deviating from the foreign policy of the last president, President Duterte, when in fact during the campaign period, no, and even during his inaugural speech, he said, I mean, I'm referring to the current president, President Marcos Jr., that he said that, the Philippines will pursue an independent foreign policy. And when you talk about being independent, it means that you're not necessarily leaning toward one country over the other, especially when you talk about the dynamics between the United States and China. Because, you have this, we cannot deny, there's really that existing power rivalry and competition between these two superpowers. I call China already as a superpower at the moment, no, but it's still a rising superpower at this time. So, basing on that statement during the inaugural speech, if I am not mistaken, no, that the country will pursue an independent foreign policy under his administration, I think the president I don't know, from a unsolicited advice is to go back to that kind of framework, that, the country will pursue an independent foreign policy. And I think the Philippines and the Philippine government should possibly look at realities on the ground, and also should try to look and really value and put premium, I think, on the national interest of the country, and should also try to ponder on that the country should not be used by any superpower, for that matter, for their own interests, and for the, in terms of geopolitics is costly. In many sense, you look at Ukraine crisis at the moment. So I think what the country has to look for and what has to focus on is economics. And when you talk about economics, it's very much evident that China is the engine of economic growth at the moment. And we can benefit from a very good relationship with China, deeper relationship with China in terms of in the economic front. And we can also benefit from the technological advancement of China. On that note, it also means that we need to be very sensitive of the things and the issues that are very important to the Chinese people and to the Chinese government, so that we can have we can have deeper understanding, and at least we can strike a balance, about all of these things that's going on in the world, especially when you talk about geopolitics. I don't say that we don't want to we don't get along with the United States. Of course, we have to, because United States is a strong power, is a great power. At the same time, it's a friend to us. But I think we need to be very careful how to navigate these things. And we should not be naive about what's going on in the world at the moment. So I think the president has to go back. Well, because it's really obvious at the moment, there is this kind of leaning, or I don't know, pivot to United States, and many other analysts are actually saying that the Philippines is pivoting to the United States. But I think what the government has to think about is the consequences of these things. I think reflect more, ponder on, and probably go back to the drawing table, and also look and go back to what you call meaningful independent foreign policy for the country.
Yeah.
That's much more my response to the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
Wilson Yumil is raising his hand.
Yes.
It is premature for us to be judgmental on the direction of where our foreign policy is going under the BBM administration. He has been in office for just over 100 years. If we have, 100
days.
Yes. If we have to second guess whatever motives BBM has, we have to take account also first the recent pronouncement of the presidential sister, Senator Amy, that the people should not, or the world should not make the administration choose between US and China. That is very much the essence of an independent foreign policy, not taking sides. Secondly, on the personal side of BBM, all we have to remember is the event in February 1986. The Marcos family was dropped like a hot potato. Would he be willing to be in the warm embrace against of those Americans? Thank you.
I'd just like to add something, Wilson.
Yes.
Number one, this is not just a matter of being enemy to none and friends to all, because the OIC of President PBBM in the Defense Department had stated in his meeting with U.S. Secretary Austin, in clear violation of the fundamental principles, even of the MDT, the Military Defense Treaty with the United States. This OIC of the Defense Department said that the Philippines will allow the Philippine bases to be used by the Americans in case of a conflict with China.
That's
over
a follow-up
Taiwan.
question.
That is already outside of the MDT, and that is not anymore neutrality to be allowing the Philippine bases to be used. Even Madam and Senator whom I respect, Amy Marcos, has said that, and this is all over the social media, has said that the Philippines is interested in a strong military presence of the United States. So these are contradictions that they need to explain to the people if they wish to avoid the other suspicions that I aired earlier.
Thank you, Mr. Laurel. There's a follow-up question related to what you just mentioned. And thank you to the analyst who answered the question of Ado Paglinawan. The question next is from Ateneo de Manila University. Professor Dr. Jobino Miroy. Dr. Joby Miroy said, the Philippines should strive to be more engaged to achieve lasting peace in the Taiwan Straits, referring to what Dr. Henry Chan, to what Professor Anna said about peaceful reunification. How can this be done? How can the Philippines help achieve peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait? And maybe I want to add, how can the Philippines also maybe help in this dream of peaceful reunification of both? Last week, a Vietnamese official was at Pandesal Forum, and he mentioned about the division of Vietnam before between North and South Vietnam, and he shared the dream that most Asians want to have reunification of the Chinese nation peacefully. Any suggestions from our panelists how the Philippines should strive to help achieve lasting peace in Taiwan Strait?
Okay.
From Dr. Joby Miroy of Ateneo.
Okay, Wilson, let me quickly answer the question. No, I think when you talk about the Taiwan Strait, I think the basic, for me, the way I analyze and also study the whole issue, no, because I've written a lot of articles actually about these things and published in different commentary newspapers, no, yeah. I think when you talk about the Taiwan Strait question, one basic principle I think that actually China is always also reiterating is the basic one of the fundamental tenets of China's relation with different countries across the globe, and it's around 181 relationship of China across the globe, 181 countries, is to respect and uphold what called the One China policy. So the One China policy states that Taiwan is a province of China. It's very much an inalienable part of China. And it's part of the territorial integrity of China as a country, the People's Republic of China, being led by People's Republic of China, and also of the whole China. So I think that's the basic and the fundamental tenet of any relationship of any country at all with China. So I think as a country, we need to, because we have relationship with China. It's a very good relationship at the moment, no? So I think we need to respect that. And when you say respect, we really have to make it a meaningful respect, I think, no? So, and another thing I think is for the Philippines, if we don't want to be, if we really want to avoid any conflict at all in the Taiwan Strait, also to preserve the peace and prosperity in the Asia-Pacific region, which is very important for a developing country like the Philippines. We want to be an economically developed country. We don't want any kind of gulo or any kind of trouble in our region. I think we need to respect that One China policy with regard to the Taiwan Strait question. And another important thing for the Philippines is we should not allow the Philippines to be a launching pad of the United States for any of its military operation in the Asia or what you call Indo-Pacific region. And you know what I mean, no? So probably we should try to look at these things and do something about this thing in a meaningful way, not on a lip service manner, no? Because these are very important issues that sometimes because of politics, I think, or because of of games or playing games or double talks, these are muddled. And I think we should avoid muddling issues that are very important to our national security. So I think these are two important. And another thing I think is for us also to, well, I always advocate this, no, to review our existing military agreements with the United States. If it's really necessary, it's really important. Is it useful until now? And probably if there are provisions in there that are not good for the country, or we are not really in an equal footing, no? Because it's supposed to be mutual, it means equal footing. Probably we should try to look at it and probably should try to do something about it. So these are important consideration that has been neglected or overshadowed or over, or being set aside. But I think in the long run, these are important things that will affect us if we will not do something about it. So these are my kind of answer to that very provoking question. Thank you.
I think
Thank
Yomil
you,
was raising
Professor
his
Anna.
hand.
Yes,
I want to
Dr.
share-
Henry Chan. As yes.
I want to share this view because actually this issue, Anna has already put it very well. Philippines should act on its national interest. But I want to share you the view from Taiwan and the view from on a global setting. First, this Taiwan issue, is it just a simple US-China issue or Taiwan issue, or is a whole picture of global geopolitical rebalance? Actually, more and more scholars, John Mearsheimer and Henry Kissinger, they put it as an issue of geopolitical global rebalancing. Now, in this context, I don't think Philippines can do much. I don't think ASEAN can do much, because no matter how Philippines do, how ASEAN do, you cannot really move the needle over Taiwan Straits. Number two, there's a very scary scenario. The Taiwanese themselves have said there are three outcomes if there are talks. First is that China will talk to Taiwan about the two means. Second is that China and US will talk with Taiwan as a participants. And the third and the most scary scenario is that when it comes to crunch time, China will just talk to the United States, and Taiwan will be the taker of whatever is the outcome of talks between the China and the United States. Okay, so this is the global resetting. And second, in any military conflict arises, the only thing that matters is that who wins and who loses. Now, if any US military website, after the Pelosi visit, you'll be surprised to find out that US now there's a lot of soul searching. Is the US interest in Asia just confined to Taiwan? Are US sure that they will win the war? If you look at what happened in Ukraine, you realize that actually one of the countries that know what is the outcome and go into the new weapon development was China. So if you look at the US military circles, there's a joke in the United States today. The most always on China-US military relation is the US military. And the most hawkish is the US Congress as usual. So I think that the Philippines should get a very comprehensive view about what can you do. Does it matters? Or you just be the one in front? Because one thing people forget in history is in 1945, Manila was the most ruined city in Asia.
Yes.
Okay, I
yes,
think
we were
Yomil-
the most ruined in the world
I think-
next to Warsaw. Yes, the worst in Asia. You're correct.
Wilson, I think Yomil raised his hand.
Yes, Attorney Leomil. Yes, Dr. Leomil
The best
Portadera.
thing the Philippines can do on the matter of PRC China row is like to stay out of it. Treat it as a domestic issue. In
Yes.
China's constitution provides that Taiwan is a province. In the same way that even that Taiwan claims to have jurisdiction over mainland China, treat it as a domestic issue. And as Professor Anna mentioned, and don't let any mutual defense treaty allow us to be a launching pad and a front line in the war. As Professor Herman mentioned, some would say that despite the pronouncements of OIC and even some political leaders, we have to take account that most of these statements are only for popular or political consumption. We have a working government structure. We can go to court and declare and ask for even the Supreme Court and ask for redress or remedy should there be any violation of our constitution in the actions in case of war between China and Taiwan, and the Philippines being used as a base for launch pad for attacks. Thank you.
Yeah, Wilson,
Thank you
if I
very
may
much.
add one or 2 points. Number one,
Yes.
we are falling into the hybrid war trap of the United States when we get so involved with the Taiwan question, because I subscribe to what Leomil has just said. It is an internal affair of China. And one of the basic principles of peaceful coexistence that as far back as 1955, the Philippines, including many developing countries, subscribed to the principles of peaceful coexistence in the Bandung Conference is non-interference in the internal affairs of any country. If we get too involved into it, especially if our bases are being offered for any actions, of course, Leomil is correct. A lot of these are public pronouncements which may not be in reality adhered to by the government, but public pronouncements should be very carefully stated. Like in China, they never go out of the official principles and make wayward public statements. This, as Yomila said, creates so much confusion. So first
Thank you.
principle about Taiwan is non-interference in China's internal affairs. Taiwan is a province of China. If China wants to integrate it by any means, it is the matter for China to consider, not for anybody else outside, because we fall into the trap of the Americans of becoming involved in it when we should not be. Number two, I think the Philippines and ASEAN should really consider what, in not exactly in the words of Mahathir, but due to the last provocation of the Nancy Pelosi visit to Taiwan, the reaction of former Prime Minister of Malaysia, Mahathir, was to pivot to China, because these provocations of the United States are pushing the region into conflict, tension and conflict, and possibly war, making Taiwan the Ukraine of East and Southeast Asia. And we do not want that. So this brings me to this final point. I think the Philippines and ASEAN should consider making a statement against the freedom of navigation of the United States and its Western allies in the region, because warships are not conducive to international harmony and peace. We are open to all ships of all trading nations when it comes to merchant shipping, passenger shipping, and so on, but not warships. I think this freedom of navigation is really the main means of the United States to provoke this tension and conflict in our region. So a statement from ASEAN and the Philippines regarding this, since the Philippines also is signatory to the Zone of Peace, Freedom, and ZOPFAM and neutrality of the Southeast Asian nations, and the other agreement I cannot immediately recall right now, no? But we have agreements that already justify keeping out foreign warships in our region.
Thank you very much, Mr. Laurel, Attorney Portadera, Dr. Chan, and Professor Ana Malindogoy. Just to end this question of Professor Joby Miroy, I'd like to mention last Saturday, the Vietnamese official who came to Pandesal Forum, Mr. Tran Dac Loy, reminded the listeners that in the Vietnam-Indo-China war, actually, in the 60s or 70s, he said Philippine military bases were used to bomb Vietnam and Indochina by the Americans, which I hope will not happen. I agree with all the four analysts here. We hope this will not happen in the Taiwan situation, just in case any conflict or emergency happens. Agree with all of you, peace, and agree with Professor Joby Miroy, peace should be our focus. There's another question here from among our listeners. Many are in Facebook, others via Zoom. The question here by Mr. Al Galang. Question, how should the Philippines interact with China given its looming attaining #1 global superpower status? How should the president of our country posture his position to this projected rise of China as #1 economy in the world and superpower? Is our president displaying it too early to view? This was already answered about the presidents. How do we interact with China is the question of Mr. Al Galang. Especially economically, how can we beat our neighbors in tapping the China market? We are losing out to Vietnam. Vietnam has thousands of China factories. Thailand, before the pandemic, 10, 11 million China tourists a year. We only have 1 or 2. Any questions, suggestions on how we can better interact with the rising China and benefit from it, the Philippines? And after this CPC Congress, the direction they will go, how can the Philippines benefit from this? We are just 2 hours away by plane from the rising economic superpower.
Yeah, I think how we can benefit from a rising economic engine of the world at the moment, which is China. I think actually we should capitalize on our existing friendly understanding with China and also friendship. No, we have a long history of friendship with China. Dates back even before the colonization of the Spaniards of the Philippines. No, so I think that one of the factors that we have to look at and at the same time capitalize on. I think when you talk about China, there are, of course, in any relationship, there are always, it's not a perfect relationship. There are always challenges and, of course, issues, no, that we need to probably resolve with China. And I think everyone knows that we have that the South China Sea is one of the contending issues, not only between China and the Philippines, but even among other claimant states. But I think what is important for us is to deepen our mutual and pragmatic cooperation with China, especially in the economic front. I think we should focus as a country on economic development and progress, and what we can benefit from our relation with China in this sphere, rather than focusing on geopolitics. Geopolitics is costly. It will cost us a lot. I think as a developing country, as a country that's struggling economically at the moment, we should try to focus on economics, how we can capitalize on the China market by exporting our agricultural produce, especially fruits, processed fruits, goods, or juices, or whatever, no, and probably we should try to ask China about how they can help us with our agriculture. The agriculture in China is where agricultural technological advancement in China is very, very high, and it's really advanced. And I think as an agricultural country, we can benefit from that by, deepening that kind of pragmatic. I emphasize the word pragmatic here, no, because pragmatic means you look at the practical conditions and realities on the ground, and you see how you benefit from that relationship rather than exaggerating the small, tiny issues that is affecting the whole bilateral relation between China and the Philippines. So that's, I think, the way forward for us. A little bit of let's not emphasize too much of the differences, because I think these differences we have with China over the South China Sea, which is, I think, the only difference that's really affecting the whole bilateral relation of the two countries is a tiny part in the overall bilateral relation. And at the same time, I think there are people in the Department of Foreign Affairs who are actually resolving this and establishing that kind of consultative and communication, no, on this issue, and let them handle their job. So I think what is important for us is economic development. Focus on that. Set aside geopolitics. It's very costly for the Philippines. So that's my answer to the question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yomil is raising his hand.
Yes,
Yomil.
Attorney Yomil.
We benefited and suffered as pawns of the Cold War and geopolitics. If we remember and look back in history, our sugar industry was at its boom because of the sugar embargo of Cuba. Then the sugar quota would eventually be reduced by the NAFTA in favor of products or sugar canes from Honduras and Central America. In the same way that we benefited, by the way, Sir Wilson, the reason why we allowed the launching of bombers during the Indochina War was by virtue of a SATO, Southeast Asian Treaty Organization, of which we were a member. Eventually,
yes.
Now defunct, not between the Mutual Defense Treaty. So because of the provisions, but then the Philippines also benefited in the same way that one night in Bangkok and the honky towns in Angeles and around Clark benefited from American R&R spending. But then after that, our economy would suffer. So that would be only temporary in exchange for a long-lasting national benefits for our people. Now, if we go back, the 6 years of Duterte administration was the pinnacle of China and Philippine relationship as Republican states. No, it was said that the pronouncements of Duterte over BFA and their termination would sound music to the ears of the Chinese leadership, but China wanted more. for a truly independent foreign policy was a scrapping of the Mutual Defense Treaty, and it would start with the scrapping or termination of the Visiting Forces Agreement. Duterte tried that. Perhaps the lack of time, perhaps the expediency of political situation, the next election, it did not come through, and in fact, he terminated the suspension of the BFA after informing the U.S., the counterpart U.S. government. By then, how do we benefit from the economic power of China? The best thing is to stay the course. China is our number one trading partner. Is our number one destination of our products. So stay the course. Stay the course. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Attorney Leomil Aportadera.
Unless Henry Chan has something to
Yes.
say, I'd like to come in. Henry, anything you want to?
Oh, thank you. Actually, Anna and Professor Emilia already put their cases so well. My only thing to say is that we act according to our national interests, put a priority. I definitely agree with Anna. Let us look for agriculture modernizations. Let us look for technology imports that can benefit the Philippines. I think these are issues much more imperative to every Filipinos than geopolitics. Now, international law is a lot of contradictions. And there's a lot of rule setting that was really based on colonial era history. If we do not understand the historical context, I think that we can easily make very poor judgments. And again, as I said, the last thing is that unlike the Vietnam War, in which Philippines can be just a peaceful onlookers, this time, if there's really some confrontations, I don't think that the Philippines will be spared of damages.
We are the nearest neighbor, no?
Yes.
No. I mean, that at that time, the US can hit the Vietnam any way it liked.
Yes.
Yes.
Obviously, the game has changed.
Yes.
Yes. If I may now add, Wilson and
Yes,
everybody.
Mr. Laurel.
In fact, the Philippines does not have to do much to benefit from trade with China, such
Yes.
as, for example, our being the number one banana exporter to China
Yes.
because of the conflict in Taiwan. When
Yes.
China shifted, I think in 2019, all their orders from Taiwan to the Philippines.
Pineapples also,
Unfortunately, within our country, there is not just passivity, but there is resistance against China by a very few politicians like Hontiveros opposing the regional comprehensive economic partnership. Because agreeing to the RCEP, ratifying it immediately, would allow China to consider the Philippines as a relocation site for its industries that is being limited and pressured by the trade war of the United States against China. But without that ratification, what chance will the Philippines benefit from the industrial relocation of Chinese business, which is benefiting Vietnam tremendously today?
Yes, yes.
So
You're correct,
internally, we
Mr.
have
Laurel.
to remove some elements that have been really an obstacle to restoring the 1,000 years of good trading and beneficial to the Philippines all throughout the 1,000 years of trading with China. These internal matters, such as, of course, our electricity is double that of Vietnam, Thailand, and of course, China, which no matter what policy changes we have, if the electricity is double the other ASEAN countries, we cannot invite China's industries into the Philippines, at least to begin joint ventures and then eventually maybe for the Philippine industrialization to jumpstart. So
Thank you, Mr. Laurel. Even to add to your point, Mr. Laurel, even the American Chamber of Commerce in the Philippines, the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, the European Chamber, they are all lobbying for approval, ratification of RCEP by the Philippine economy, so we could benefit from the rise of China and the ASEAN, this new free trade agreement, RCEP. Thank you.
Wilson, there's a question from Benedicto on the chat.
I will read.
And
I will read the
he's asking,
questions.
is it because Hontiveros may be wanting to keep the Philippines pristine and fresh and so on. But I think China has proven that industrialization is compatible with harmony with the environment. You know?
Yes. Mentioning about being pristine, somebody asked, short lang answer to everyone, but more questions. Your stand on the POGO request of the China government for the Philippine government to stop the controversial illegal businesses we are allowing in the Philippines, the POGOs. In the entire ASEAN, everybody's banning it. We
Recording
are still
stopped.
one of the few still allowing it. Short answer to this short question. POGO. Are you for or against it?
Okay, POGO. POGO, one thing is illegal in China. For me, I think what is important is, I understand that there are resource generation from POGO, but what matters most, I think, is the social fabric. It's a source of many things, no? In terms of social issues in the country. So for me, I am not for POGO. If there's a possibility for it to stop, then let it be. Because it is a cause of a lot of social ills in the Philippines, including kidnapping. So I don't think the benefit of POGO will outweigh the social problems that it causes the country. And there are other possibilities for us to generate resources like BPOs. So that's my stand on the issue.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Ana.
I think Yomil is raising his hand.
Attorney Yomil Portadera.
Congressman Joey Salceda mentioned, I think just last week, that there was already a law on POGO, and that would mean that it is legal under Philippine laws. The wisdom of legislature in coming up with a law should be respected, because by their research, it would have meant that they expected some windfall in terms of revenues and taxes by the POGO operation. So my take on that is we do not have to make haste over the matter, because a lot of hype was being said about kidnappings, but percentage-wise, how many POGO operators, how many POGO personnel have been involved in these high-profile kidnapping crimes? Are these crimes being hyped for some reasons that the public do not know? Thank you.
Very good, thought-provoking question.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that, Wilson. I think it's all a question of cost and benefit. The ratio can be studied and decided on. But when I was also asked about that, I said and criticized about that, I responded to the questionnaire, and can you replace the tens of thousands of jobs that are going to Filipinos, and if you add the multiplier effect of laundry ladies, taxi drivers, delivery people who are employed indirectly also, this comes up to quite a sum. Now, the Lee Chiu Real Estate Development Group estimates that around $1 billion, if I'm not mistaken, close to $1 billion of rentals will be lost. But I'm not certain about the figure, but it's some. So these are significant questions. Now, of course, as a friend to China, we would like to comply with China's request. But I think Leomil is correct. It's just a matter of timing. We should ban it eventually. But today, while we're in a crisis from the pandemic, 2 years of pandemic problems, maybe we should balance the cost and benefit ratio. About the about the social ills, I think the social ills have been there. Will be there with or without the POGO. I think our police authorities are able to contain these things, and so it's a matter of just dealing with some of the problems that it generates. But right now, the jobs are really, really very important for many Filipinos.
Thank you, Mr. Laurel.
Can I add something?
Dr. Henry Chan, you're an expert in Cambodia. They banned it in Cambodia. A short answer, yes, you can give us news. Yes.
Actually, this year, Cambodia is ASEAN chairman. And next year, the Secretary General of ASEAN is the turn of my former directors in the institute. So I have something about ASEAN, and this is my comment about the discount RCEP. I think after Indonesia and Malaysia already approved the joining of RCEP, Philippines is the only holding out. Of course, Myanmar, but its instrument of ascension was not officially accepted. Now, the key is this. If Philippines want to use China +1 as a vehicle of economic development, now we must remember we missed the 1986 Post-Plaza Accord Japanese factory migrations. And then in the year 2000 plus, when Chinese wage going up, we also missed the factory migration into Southeast Asia, which Vietnam primarily benefited. This time, the information I get is the China +1 strategy is adopted worldwide by all the multinationals investing in this part of the world. The key beneficiary is still number one, Vietnam, and number two are the Malaysia and Indonesia. Now, if Philippines missed this boat of factory migrations, we might have to wait for another 10, 20, 30 years. I do not know. So RCEP is a very meaningful way to top this factory migrations because it is very much focused on supply chain connectivity. Yes. And number two thing is this RCEP is an ASEAN-oriented program. The secretariat of RCEP is situated in Jakarta, with us acting as a temporary secretary. So I think that when we look at this foreign policy relationship, we have to look at the historical context, the environment context, and I think what the policymakers take a very serious look is that if we want ourselves to industrialize, based on Asia history, from the time of Japan to the four small tigers to China, this industrial migration is the jump starting point. So that is my advice, my 2 cents idea.
Yeah.
We should have, thank you, Dr. Chan. We should have another session just on RCEP, the urgent issue. Yes. Thank you, Professor Anna.
Yes, I think the RCE or RCEP is very, very important for the Philippines. And I just hope, that the Senate will try to tackle it and then probably ratify it because we are already delayed. Many ASEAN countries are already benefiting from RCEP, but we are not even ratifying it or even discussing it. We've been sponsoring a lot of symposium or media forum on that. There's nothing to study about it. It has been studied by many economists and I think even political scientists or even international relation experts. No, it will benefit the country in the long run, even in the short run. And I hope we will not lose that opportunity. I've written a lot of articles on that and argued the significance of RCEP. And I hope the Philippine government and the president will, put his foot down and try to tell the Senate. The political will that, we need this. Because he said that he will study or he will do something about RCEP. So I hope it will happen soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all of you. Dr. Chan will talk about RCEP next time, an entire session. There's a question here from Ms. Joel Ting. What are the top 10 Philippine exports to China? What are the industries where China could invest in the Philippines? And his other questions are similar to what already Dr. Chan had mentioned about Philippines and China economic partnership. Short answer to this question. What are the top industries which China is interested to expand in the Philippines? And what are our top exports? And ito pa, more interesting question of Mr. Joel Ting. What are the best arrangements for a Philippine-China exploration, extraction of oil and gas in the disputed areas, joint development? With this CPC Congress finish, what outlook do you see on? And then we have a new government now. Are you optimistic about joint exploration, joint development in the seas?
Yeah. Wilson, I'll start with the short answer. In the 60-40 arrangement for the Rectobank or Reed Bank oil and gas joint venture with China, with 60% going for us. If this had not been sabotaged, delayed by the PXP group of Manny Pangilinan through its tentacles, including Teddy Boy Locsin, we might have some degree already of domestic production of oil and gas to face this energy crisis today. But unfortunately, through 6 years of negotiation, I think, of course, this is my speculation, but I think there is enough evidence to show that it is a sabotage effort by Teddy Boy Locsin to delay it for eventual takeover by the PXP of Manny Pangilinan. So again, the internal elements in our society blocking the joint development with China on many things is the one hindering our progress, our economic progress. Back to you, Wilson.
Thank you. Short answer from some. Now we are about to finish our session. Anyone wants to add short answer?
I think when you talk about possible competitive export to China in terms of goods, no, especially agricultural products, I think banana, avocado, and other high value our fruits, fruit products, and I think these are consumable goods that are very good export to China. I think it will be competitive. And also when you talk about in terms of how China can help us in the industrial side, in industrialization part, I think we should try to forge more cooperation with China when you talk about energy. And China is very good at renewable energy, especially solar energy. The solar panels in China is #1 already in the world, and I think it's very cheap. So probably in that area, in terms of renewable energy, we can tap on China and probably deepen our cooperation, pragmatic cooperation. I think that's one area. And another, I think when you talk about the 60-40, from my conversation with Chinese scholars, and academics who are working on issues or doing research on maritime and South China Sea issues, I think China is very willing to negotiate with us and also to talk with us how we can proceed with the oil and gas exploration in the South China Sea, in that disputed area. And I think it's just on our side. I think it's more on our side. How we gonna proceed and how we're gonna honor the commitment that Duterte and President Duterte and President Xi had during the time of Duterte, and also how we're gonna proceed, how we're gonna negotiate, and how we're gonna tackle this issue without looking at the high politics. High politics is also issues of sovereignty, but how we're gonna navigate this? No, because I think from the Philippine side, the big hindrance why is it not pushing is precisely because of the high politics issue, which is sovereignty issue. So I think that is the area where we can look at and how we can possibly have that pragmatic cooperation with China that we can push for this 60-40, because it's very advantageous to our side. 60 on our side, 40 on them, and they even would invest in technology and in capital and all of these things. So I think we should consider this. I am not sure how the current administration is looking at this, but I hope this will be an encouragement on the current administration that China is actually willing to negotiate with us on this. And this is important for us. We want to have energy and we have to have that security in terms of energy. And that's my answer. Thank you so much.
Okay, Wilson, this is my turn, right? Wilson? Can you hear?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Now, my 2 cents idea is this. Number one, I'm very worried about the supply chain today. Because Prime Minister Lee Hsien-loong has said, it's very obvious that US company own 50% of semiconductor factories, but they only produce 12% inside United States. It is very clear that in this semiconductor space, US is trying to migrate to move all the semiconductor fabrications and all the chains back to the United States or closer to the United States, which is very bad for Southeast Asia. The #1 trading item between ASEAN and China among all the members mostly is electronic supply chain. So there's an evolving dynamics that could potentially hurt all the Southeast Asian countries very badly, including the Philippines. And #2 is this. When you talk about these joint explorations, Anna has held a very successful webinar on that, and I was very happy and honored to be invited. Now, unless we can set aside the legal issues, because joint exploration is designed not to touch sovereignty issues.
Yes.
In Constitution,
Yes.
the 200 nautical mile was classified as territorial waters, not exclusive economic zone. So once sovereignty, the whole thing is cut off. This is a very complicated situation. If you ask me, I think it will take a long time. And the president's popularity staying at 70 to 80% is probably the only chance the Philippines can push the things forward.
Yes, I agree with Dr. Chan. We have this successful webinar on this issue actually, and Dr. Chan was one of the speakers. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Herman? Herman? No. Dr. Emilio, right?
Yes.
You have to unmute.
Yeah. Sorry, Wilson. I just wanted to mention commentaries from the online streaming. Lengua said having U.S. military presence in our country is putting us in danger rather than bringing security and stability in our country. There is a request here from Pio Amilios, from somebody else, I don't know, asking for Tagalog translation of our discussion. There are mentions from Lay Lazaro, Chinese billionaires can't dictate Chinese government, but in the Philippines, billionaires dominate. There are many comments online, but I just picked out some. Wilson, back to you. Wilson, I can't hear you. You're muted.
Muted.
Mr. Laurel, what you just mentioned about China government not allowing billionaires to dictate on them, that was part of the very good column of Mr. Randy David in the Inquirer 2 days ago. He said the government of China is resolute, will not allow billionaires and corrupt officials to dictate and escape, and they have this anti-corruption drive that is very admirable.
Yes.
Yes. So that's a very good suggestion. Maybe for all the speakers here, are you okay? Maybe we could have another session, partly or entirely in Tagalog naman, for a change.
Yeah.
Okay.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Because majority of the
Yes,
people
yes.
in our country, in the Philippines, and then maybe we could have we could have bilingual. I did not think about it. It's a very good suggestion by one of our listeners. We should perhaps do a session next time in bilingual. That means somebody talking in English, I will translate into Filipino automatically, short.
Translation.
Yes, I could draw translation. So let us, we have very little time. Can I request everyone maybe to prepare your closing statements? Maraming salamat sa lahat. Next time gagawa tayo ng session na bilingual. Every time may magsalita sa English, gagawin ko Tagalog o Filipino.
Wilson, I think you missed the remark of Dr. Emilio earlier. You have
Yes.
to name the floor.
Yes, can we, Professor Leomil Portadera, he's making a thank you. Let us start with the closing statements of people from the farther places muna. Let us start muna with Attorney Leomil Portadera. Siya ay professor sa Universidad ng San Agustin na sa Iloilo. Mag-i-English siya, ako itatagalog ko konti. Anong sinasabi niya? Sinabi kanina ni Attorney Leomil Portadera na kailangan natin pag-aralan ang China. Ang dream nila, may tinatawag silang China Dream, na wala pa daw lingwaheng Ingles, mayroon na silang phrase na China Dream. And let us have the closing statement of medical doctor, PhD, and lawyer and professor Leomil Portadera of Iloilo.
For the record, sir, I do not have a PhD. I'm a physician who is also a member of the Philippine Bar.
I'm sorry, but yes.
Of the University of San Agustin here in Iloilo City. So for my statement, there have been 20 national congresses of the Communist Party of China. Not all have been held every 5 years. Not all have been held in Beijing. In fact, not all have been held in China because one was held in Moscow after the Shanghai Purge or Shanghai Massacre brought about by the suppression of the Chinese Communist Party by the nationalist government in pre-Civil War China. And that was actually the spark for the Chinese Civil War. China has come a long way, not only as a sick man of Asia or even of the world. It was, if we remember, China was carved out into concessions by the Western power. If we learn history from the Chinese side, we have always to remember that China has been waiting for the time that it could stand on its own and stand on its own and stand up to Western demands, pressures. We have a lot to learn from it, since China has come a long way from almost eradicating poverty levels, which the Philippines should also learn from dealing with corruption in its political system, by implementing the law without fear or favor. So why look at Hollywood when we have just looked at the Chinese example and bring out millions of our own people out of poverty, following not only the Chinese example, but also what we call the Chinese dream? Thank you.
Very interesting. Ang sabi lang ito, maikli lang to. Ang sabi ni Leomil Aportadera, Professor, makasaysayan itong pambansang kongreso ng CPC ng China, hindi lang para sa bansa ng China, para sa Asia at sa mundo. Sabi niya, noon daw, masakiting bansa ng Asia ang China, ngayon bagong superpower na sa mundo ang China. Tapos ang isang achievement ng bansang ito, nalutas nila ang kahirapan, eradication ng poverty ng 1.4 billion na populasyon nila. Saka linalabanan nila ang korupsyon na napakalakas ng political will. Tapos sabi pa ni Professor Leomil Aportadera, bakit hanggang ngayon namamangha pa rin tayo sa Hollywood na kapitbahay lang natin, ang daming leksyon na maaari nating matutunan sa economic miracle ng China. Maraming salamat. Next to speak would be Dr. Henry Chan in Singapore.
I think Henry Chan, ayun, there's, is Henry
Yes.
back? I think he left.
Dr. Henry Chan, if he's
Yeah.
not yet back, well, yes.
No, sorry, there's a
Dr.
mispress.
Henry is
Henry
here.
Chan? Okay.
First, thank you very much for the invitation, and I agree totally with Leomil. I just want to remind the audience, 1978 up to now, only 44 years. China make not only economic history, but human history. No country ever grew that fast in such a broad base. They did it. So obviously they have done a lot of things right. But at the same time, I don't think that anybody can do everything right all the time. So they have made a lot of mistakes. I think that the policymakers should really learn from the history. What have China did right? What have China did wrong? Let us learn and adopt whatever things we can suit to our conditions, and then propel Philippines to the next era. Now, it's sad to tell you that in 1950s, after Japan, Philippines is actually the first country in East Asia to industrialize. And we know where we are today. So let us really take a look at what can be done, what are the right things to do, and what are the things that we have to avoid. Now, in these historical junctures, when Biden talked about the most decisive decade, and the Chinese leader talked about the unparalleled complexity, Philippines is living in a new era that can either make or break the countries. So let us have a little bit more historical perspective and look around and do things that really can help the country gain its national capacity, restore the pride to the people, and of course, feed our people well, educate them well, let them be proud to be a citizen of the Republic. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Maraming salamat kay Dr. Henry Chan na nasa Singapore. Sabi niya, pag-aralan natin ang kasaysayan, ang Pilipinas noong 1950s kasama ng Japan daw nanguna sa industrialisasyon. Bakit ngayon nahuhuli na tayo? Huwag daw tayo mahuli sa pag-partner sa China sa industrialisasyon, sa teknolohiya, Saka sinabi pa niya na ang sabi ng leader ng China, yung bagong leadership team na nanggaling sa CPC Congress lang, na ang mundo ay may tinatawag na unparalleled complexity. Walang kaparehong complexity daw. Sobrang komplikado ang mundo ngayon. Maraming krisis. Tapos sabi pa ni Dr. Henry Chan, ang importante pag-aralan natin sa leksyon or sa karanasan ng China, hindi lang political na tagumpay nila. Yung tagumpay nila sa ekonomiya, nakakagulat kasi makasaysayan yung tagumpay nila laban sa kahirapan. 1.4 billion na mga tao na naiahon nila sa kahirapan. Next, thank you very much, Dr. Henry Chan. Ang next na magsasalita, our next closing statement, Professor Ana Malindog-Uy.
Thank you very much to everyone for attending this media forum. Thank you to my co-panel of speakers for being here and for gracing this media forum as well, and to our media friends and friends and colleagues who are here at the moment. It's an honor and a pleasure for me to be invited in this media forum. First thing is first, I think for me, the China economic development and growth, I think despite challenges that China is facing at the moment that I've mentioned earlier in my opening statement, will continue. It means that the economic story of growth and the economic development of China will continue despite all these challenges that they're facing as a country. So in that regard, I think the Philippines as part of the developing world, or Philippines as a developing country, should be wiser enough how to navigate its relation between China and the United States when you talk about geopolitics. I think that's very important for us. And I think on that note, I think what is the way forward for the Philippines is to pursue a meaningful independent foreign policy. Putting primordial emphasis on our national interest as a country. I think that's very important for the country as a whole. I'm referring to our country, the Philippines. Second point is that the conclusion of the 20th CPC Party Congress, I think, with the conclusion of the Party Congress, I think, what is interesting at the moment is to look at China, how the new CPC leadership will perform, and how it will continue what you call the China puzzle or China miracle as an economic engine of the world at the moment. So it's very interesting for countries like the Philippines to look at it, study, and probably learn from the experience of China, especially when you talk about economic development, growth, and transformation. I think I emphasize the word transformation because it's not just that we want to have economic growth. We also want transformation in our society. And transformation almost everything. And economic growth should be inclusive at this point in time and sustainable. I think the way China does its thing when you talk about this economic stuff, I think we should try to look at it, study, and probably learn from their experience. Probably from that point of view, we can also get some kind of insights, technology, and knowledge, how we can apply it to our own context. But I think it's very important for us to understand that we should not copy things from any country at all. We should base it on our own history, our own context, and our own comparative advantage and competitive advantage as a country. So that's my closing statement. And thank you again for being with us in this media forum. And good
Maraming
morning.
salamat ulit kay Professor Ana Malindog-Uy. Sabi niya, ang kapitbahay natin na China ay economic engine of the world, makinang pang-ekonomiya ng mundo. Kasi ibang mga ekonomiya pumapalya, parang humihina ang makina nila. Tapos ang sabi pa ni Professor Ana Malindog-Uy, very important, independent foreign policy of the Philippines. Kailangan sabi niya, meaningful independent foreign policy, ibig sabihin makabuluhang malayang patakarang panlabas. Next, we'd like to invite Mr. Herman Laurel, of course, President of the Asian Century Philippine Strategic Studies Institute, our partner for this Pandesal Forum, an intellectual and nationalist, for your closing statement.
Maraming salamat, Ginoong Wilson D. Flores. Natutuwa po si Leonora Matundan yung nag-request po ng pagsalin sa Tagalog o sa Pilipino. ng mga
Yes.
diskusyon po rito.
Ano
Kahit na
ginawa ko nung
medyo,
umpisa, next time, promise,
Okay.
bilingual.
kahit na medyo nadidetect pa rin ang kaunting puntong pagka-inchik ni Wilson Lee
Oo nga eh,
Flores.
oo nga. Ganun pa rin.
Okay. And so, natutuwa po ako sa ating mga participants. Talagang sineryoso po ang diskusyon natin. 2 oras po na walang patid ang kanilang atensyon. Ano? So, higit 5 po. Ano? And so, it shows the maturity with which our intellectual and thinking class is taking this issue. Marami po tayong matututunan dito sa mga diskusyon na ito, lalo-lalo tungkol sa China. And of course, yung mga nakapansin po dito sa online streaming na ang leadership ng China ay egalitarian, mga technical experts talaga, mga engineers, mga sociologists and so on. We have to do our part and learn from all these. It's now 11:58, so I will quickly end the departing remarks.
Thank you. Maganda yung sinabi ni Herman Laurel na ang China, ang bagong liderato nila, egalitarian, technocratic, nakatutok sa siyensya. Sinabi din ni Dr. Henry Chan kanina yan. Tapos si Attorney Leomil Aportadera sinabi na nagkaroon ang China ng bagong focus sa tinatawag nilang China Dream. We in the Philippines should have our Philippine Dream also as part of Asia and get inspiration from China. And also thank you, Professor Ana Balindog-Uy, for reminding us repeatedly, independent foreign policy is pro-Philippines. Dr. Henry Chan said, national interest of the Philippines should be our number one guide in every decision, in how we think also. And of course, Mr. Herman Laurel reminding us that our neighbor is our ancient friend, the best trading partner for more than 1,000 years, the best in terms of volume, the best in terms of frequency and also potential. Tomorrow, we will send out an invitation via Zoom at Pandesal Forum. We have, for our media friends, we'll send out a very important Pandesal Forum tomorrow. And on Thursday, the Cuban ambassador will be at Pandesal Forum also. Tomorrow is the China ambassador. Thank you to everyone. And all the media friends, please send us where we could send Pandesal and lunch packs. We have prepared special lunches for all our media participants. Sorry, we could not send to everyone physically, but we will send it our lunch. And thank you to everyone. Once again, this is very important. In Pandesal Forum, we encourage geopolitics and international perspective. We should not be only parochial and thinking of local politics only. At saka maganda reminder of our speakers today, let us please focus on economic relationship and exchanges with China and US and everyone, not on geopolitics. We are not a geopolitical player. Dr. Henry Chan reminded us, we do not really matter in many matters. It's actually the two giant superpowers at loggerheads. We are little ants here that will let us benefit from the situation. Once again, thank you very much for joining Pandesal Forum. Good afternoon already. Yes, 12:01. Good afternoon.
It's 12, yeah.
Thank you very much. Let us
Thank
study
you.
and learn from our neighbor, China. Thank you.
Thank
to
you.
our
Thank
media
you,
friends.
Dr.
Thank
Chan.
you.
I replied to your
Thank you,
email.
Thank you,
Thank
Anna.
you.
Thank you.
Thank
See you
you.
next time.
Thank you. Thank
Next
you.
time. Thank you. Have a
Thank you
good
to
day.
all
Have
our
a good day,
media friends
everyone.
who attended and all other friends. Thank you.